Hey everybody, I'm Kevin,
I'm Frank.
and as we continue to take you behind the headstock, you might be wondering to yourselves, who's Kevin and Frank? What did they do at Gibson, and what do they know? Or what's our backstory? Well, we're going to take the rest of this episode and give you a background on us and what Frank and I did together and what led us to Gibson in the first place. So stick around.
Go behind the headstock with Kevin and Frank, two ex-Gibson employees talking about guitars and the guitar industry with an inside perspective.
All right. Well, welcome back. And my name is Frank Johns, and my story is a long one, but we'll skip a bunch of it. But I started around guitars from a very early age. I mean, my dad was a musician and he played, and I was always around a guitar. There was always guitars in the house. Had a very musical family. Couple of aunts, uncles played on Sundays. We'd go to grandma's and everybody would play. And I started out just playing the drums, kind of messing around, and kind of got to that. And by the time I was 3 or 4, I was actually could play the drums, but I couldn't reach the floor pedals. So they'd put me on the kit, and I just hit the hi hat and the
snare
and whatnot. And I think the first song I played was "Hang On, Sloopy" when I was like 3, playing the drums with Dad's band up in Monticello, up in the mountains at the resorts. So I started young, and then I took up the guitar. I started playing the guitar, and I started getting good. And Dad was a guitar player, but he was kind of, hanging around with the country music guys there in the Hudson Valley, and kind of trudging along. And he wanted to do his own thing. And finally, he figured out that I could play the guitar, and he would just play bass. So he handed me his Gibson SG Deluxe 1975 with a Bigsby on it. And, man, I hated that guitar. Yeah, it was awful. It was like the curse. This is kind of the curse of Gibson. I had my first guitar. Dad's like, Harry, you can do it. I started out playing this old Hagstrom guitar. And that was, I kind of learned on that and kind of fumbled around. And my cousins and I had a little kids band where we played, and I started getting good. And Dad was like, wow, we're going to start a band, and you're going to play guitar and I'm going to play bass. Okay. And I'm at this point, I'm like 11, 12. This is like 1975, something like that, 4 or 5. And so, Dad gave me the Gibson SG, and we were playing country music, and you ever try to do like a pedal steel lick with a Bigsby? It really don't work.
Right.
You can't do that. Once you bend one string, all the other ones are out of tune. So I really didn't like it. It wasn't really performing for what I wanted to do. And I saw this. I went to a music store in Newburgh, New York, and I saw this hardtail Strat hanging on. It was blonde, natural, white pickguard. Maple neck. It was like the 75 Strat.
Mm-hmm.
So the micro tilt 3-bolt neck that
Yep.
year, but it was beautiful, man. It was all ash body and natural maple neck, really nice. And plus the guy that I was kind of taking lessons from, Freddie Scribner, he had a Strat, and I always wanted one. Like, wow, man, that's a really cool guitar, because he
The
could play
real
Johnny
guitar.
Third. Yeah. And so I asked Dad, hey, can I trade in this SG? And he's like, sure. So I traded it in for the Strat, and played that really until I started working at Steinberger, basically. And I still have that. Yeah, it's right here.
Cool.
The old natural, the body's been worn off, and it went through a little surgery when Eddie Van Halen came out, and I routed it and I put a Kaler in here, and immediately hated that. So, but I had the dive bomb, so I thought the Kaler, this way I didn't have to route out the back of the body.
Oh,
So
yeah. Gotcha.
Kaler would just drop in, right?
All right. Yeah, that was a hardtail, huh?
Right, yeah. So, I took the Kaler out and plugged it years later with a swamp-ass plug, and this is a Babbitt's bridge.
Cool.
My buddies Jeff Babbitt's and Jeff Carano.
Now, you knew those guys. You knew those guys from Steinberger, right?
Yeah. So And
Hey,
that's where
how did you end up at Steinberger?
Well, it was kind of, I was looking for a gig, and a friend of mine was dating this lady that worked there, Michelle. And he said, well, go talk to Michelle. She books wedding bands in the city. So she was booking like these high profile gigs in the city. And she was like upper management at Steinberger. So I just went to Steinberger to talk to her. And I'm like walking around. It's like, hey, look there's guitars all over the place. What is this? I was like, where the hell? I didn't know what even Steinberger was at that point.
Oh, no, it's great.
I walked in and it's like, oh, wow, they make guitars here. So, I'm talking to Michelle about trying to get my band booked, and it's not going that great. And she's like, hey, do you want to make guitars? And I was like, well, let me see. So she brought the plant manager up, and I talked to him. And next thing I know, I'm working at Steinberger factory making guitars. And I met Jeff Carano, the Jeffs, and Jeff Babbitts and those guys, and we worked together for a long time. I worked there that was February of 87. I started there. And then Gibson bought him in like 88. So Henry was coming up all the time, and they had like, Gibson shirts and buttons. They were all trying to be pro Gibson, and Henry comes up, and he came up on the one day we were having this big party. We were all outside. The Steinberger was a really cool place, man. It was a family atmosphere. Ned worked on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
He was friendly with everybody, knew him. You could stop and talk to Ned about anything. He was really smart guy and really, really personable,
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great place to work, man. We really loved it. And we gathered up a bunch of money. They would sell you parts, like they'd have an auction. They'd put parts on the break table. And it was like, hey, I'll pay $5 for that trans-chem. And if nobody else said $6, you got it,
That's great.
So I wound up with all these Steinberger parts. I was just buying parts and buying stuff. And I actually made my own. I bought a body that had a problem with it, and I learned how to fix it. I clocked out every night and stayed and worked on them. And they taught me, people would teach me how to do it, and I would work with them. And so, yeah, I learned how to do the whole process there. And Brian Moore from Brian Moore Guitars,
Mm-hmm.
he was like the head of engineering for Steinberger at that time. So I worked with him a lot, and that was a really fun job. I really loved it, working there. It was nasty. As Henry said, you probably would have been dead after a while. Because, man, we worked in the mold room, and it was some nasty chemicals,
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, we weren't the safest crew, So yeah, we didn't know any better. I didn't know what any of that was, resin, vinyl, the resin and styrene, and I don't know, cobalt, and I didn't know what any of that was. And but I learned quickly not to mess with it and what to do. So, and then, we gathered up all this money, and Ned said, hey, find out what everybody wants to do with this money. So we bought a break room, shit for a new microwave for the break room. And we did some work outside. I got people to show up, and we made a break area, and we had money left over. And Ned said, throw a party. So we bought a grill and had hamburgers and hot dogs. We shut down work at lunchtime, and it was cool, got a keg of beer out there. And who shows up but Henry that night? I'm standing there at getting the beer, and here goes the guy says, hey, I'd like to introduce you to somebody. This is Henry Juskowitz. And I met Henry, and I hey, you like a beer? And we sat there and drank all night, and and I wound up asking him, like, drank enough beer to say, hey, can I transfer to Nashville? And he said, sure. And that was as much as it took. And I was off and running. Yep. So I started in Nashville in 89.
But I'm sorry, Frank, at that point, you knew you were moving?
I wanted to. No, we didn't know Gibson was going to move Steinberger. I had no clue.
Oh,
it was it was in a cool little spot, and they had like a little shop behind us that made the cases, the gig bags for it. So they were all contained. Labella Strings was right down the street. So they made all the strings right down the street. They made the cases in the back room. It was all kind of self-contained, So
but you were asking Henry at that point to come work for Gibson.
Yeah, I wanted to move to Nashville because, I was playing in New York, and I was like, man, I want to go to Nashville and play. I thought, I could to Nashville. And Henry was very accommodating, and, he paid for mileage on my old van that I loaded up and carried down here. And one day in February, I just drove down and started work. I started working on the neckline because I molded necks, and the plant manager at Gibson wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. And I was a neck molder, so I was carbon fiber molded necks. And he said, "Oh, we'll put you on the neckline." So all of a sudden, I'm out of sanding block and a machine trying to carve a neck out of a piece of mahogany. I had no clue what I was doing. So yeah, they put me with Louis Biss from Kalamazoo. Was my
I remember Louis. Yeah.
Yep. And Jeff Allen was there. Was a handhole in the necks. And I met a lot of good people and made a lot of good friends that I still have today.
All right. So then, how did you end up at Steinberger and Tobias?
Well, Steinberger, that's where Steinberger started. I had the already background from Steinberger, and I went back to Gibson. And, my progress at Gibson was pretty quick. I was in the neckline, but not long. We had one of the Gibson jams down at the Pink Elephant, and I brought my Steinberger. I had a little green Steinberger I still have. And I brought that with me, and I played there at the Gibson jam. And
I remember the Pink Elephant.
Yeah, downstairs at the Pink Elephant Lounge. And I played, and he was like, "Oh my God, we need to get you in Final Assembly," because at that point, Final Assembly was working a lot of hours. They needed people who could assemble guitars. And I was stupid, and he said, "Hey," because I was working the neckline, man. It was like 6 to 2:30. I was home at 2:45 every day, and I was happy. And I went to Final Assembly, and it was like unlimited overtime. Stay to the get number. I'd be getting home 8, 9 o'clock at night. We worked a lot of hours there in Final Assembly. But yeah, I only spent 6 months doing the wood stuff, and then I went up to Final Assembly and started building guitars. And Floyd Leonard's son, Randy, was head of doing quality control. And that's when Smyrna plant, the Nissan plant, came into Smyrna, and we lost a lot of employees. A lot of people went to Nissan and jumped. And for good jobs, they were paying well, and it was going to be a good job. So Randy Leonard went, and they needed somebody to do quality control. And they knew I could play profusely, as a musician playing around. So they knew I had the chops to play, and I had the lowest reject rate building the guitars. So they asked me if I wanted to be in quality control, and I did that for a couple years. I played 250 guitars a day for like 90, probably 1 to 90, end of 92, 93, a couple years. So it was a lot of playing and a lot of work, a lot of hours. And
did you sign the inspection sheets?
Yeah. I signed the tags. I wrote the ES note, all the tags inside the ES dots and everything. That's all my handwriting.
That's awesome. So there's a bunch of inspection tickets out there with Frank Johns' signature on it.
Oh, yeah. I signed everything. Yeah. I wrote the tag out that made it leave the plant. When I said it was good, it left the plant and went to the warehouse at that point.
Yep.
They had a guy bagging them up, Harry Dial. But anyway, it was really taxing job, and I really enjoyed it, but it was hard and a lot of work and a lot of hours. And Steinberger moved back. At that point, Steinberger wasn't doing that well, and Henry moved them from New York to Acorn Drive, to that picture, that building you had. It was like, hey, yeah, there's the building.
Yeah.
And right there at the end of that corner is where Gibson is. So if you look straight down
right
the road,
down here. Yep, that's where the parking lot is.
That's the parking lot for the plant. So it's really was right next door. So they had that building, and they moved us over there to Steinberger. And I asked, hey, could I go back to Steinberger? Because they didn't have any employees, and I had all the knowledge, and they only had like 2, maybe 3 people came from New York. So when I asked Henry, I said, hey, can I go back to Steinberger? They need help. And he was like, yes, they do. Yes, you can go back. So they moved me back at the end of kind of 92. I left and went back to Steinberger and worked there for a while. It was great. I was working under the guy who had came, Rob Ortiz was the manager, and he came from New York. And so I worked for him and helped him out because I knew all the whole production line and how to mold. I knew all I could teach, and help them train people.
You knew the whole process. It's amazing.
Right. Yeah, I did. I knew that they had some unique machines to Steinberger manufacturing and I knew how to operate. So it was.
You know how to set them up.
Yeah, really, I did.
And how to plug them in.
I kind of helped them hire people and train people, and so I kind of got that going and did that for a while, and then that's when they bought Tobias, and they had our buddy Carl Hansen was kind of the general manager over the Steinberger division at that time. So they said, we're moving Tobias to this same building. So it's going to be one company, Steinberger and Tobias. And Rob, the plastics engineer, said, hey, I know nothing about wood, nothing. And I don't want to have nothing to do with Tobias. So they were like, oh, okay. So Carl looked at me. He's like, how about you? I said, I'll do it. I was naive. I never said no. That was my problem at Gibson.
Yeah, me too.
Like, you do this? Yeah. There's nothing I can't do. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had the confidence to say, there's nothing I can't do.
Right, we figured it out. That's funny. Yeah. I remember there were times where you and I were in those situations like, all right, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Go back to the drawing board and then figure out something. We were intelligent enough to do that, and cocky and cocky enough to do it, to say, yeah, I'll do it. So I went to Tobias for a couple of weeks out in California. They flew me out to California, and everybody from Tobias was like, I'm not moving to Nashville from California. No. So they're like, okay, you got nobody. So I made a video of the whole process and wound up coming back and hired a whole crew. And they let me pick a couple people from the plant. And I took 3 people. I took Corky Kennedy, who could run the rough mill, and Steve Merritt, who knew how to glue wood up. So Steve could glue up all my blanks. And I took actually my wife, Rhonda, and she came and carved necks for us because she was the best neck carver Gibson had ever had. So,
well, and you think about it too, all the multi-piece necks that were over in Tobias, you picked the right people.
Yeah. I had to get some people like that. So, and I got another guy, Mike Earps, that do final assembly, so I didn't have to teach somebody how to do the assembly.
You set up.
And Mike Tobias would fly down and help me train the people and hire new people. And we would send bases to Mike, and he would critique them and tell us what to do, and really helped us get us going. And before he got out, he had like 1 year he had to be in before he could get out from selling the company. So, and that's how I got over to Tobias, and that went, till 96 or so, for about 4 years.
And that's kind of when I entered the picture in 96. But backing up a minute, how many guitars did Steinberger do a day, and how many was Tobias doing a day?
We were trying. I mean, I had probably 9 employees total or something like that. So we were trying to do about 30 guitars a week between the 2 divisions. And plus orders, we had no advertising, at Henry was.
Yeah.
No advertising, no sales, really. The sales people didn't really help us out. It's a hard instrument, Steinberger and a Tobias. They were both kind of unique niche markets,
Very. Yep.
So, we had a lot of problems with getting parts, getting wood, paying the bills. So we struggled. It was a constant struggle, but, and then like we talked about before, 30% growth the next year. Well, how are you going to do that?
Right.
Selling $7,000 or $8,000 bass guitars, 30% growth. Okay. We hope to sell 1 more than we did last year, but, so I learned from some of the greatest people, between Mike Tobias and Ned Steinberger, who I still consider to be friends with, both of those guys. Those guys taught me so much, and then working at the plant with all the people. So after the Tobias thing, they wanted to move me back out. They needed help at the plant with quality control again. in 96. And that's when they sent me back to the USA division. And they were having quality control problems. They had went to this TQM process where they would inspect 10 guitars and say, okay, the rest of the night looks good.
I remember that.
And I'm like, nah, I fought them. It was a battle, because I went to the general manager and he knew I knew Henry. And so I had a little clout, and I was like, you can't do that. This is a handmade instrument. Each one is different from the last one. These are not screws that some machine's spitting out, So he was like, okay, you could have 2 people, because they kept the people that we had in quality control. They had kept all the people I knew who knew what they were doing, but they just weren't, they were doing other operations.
They put them on other things.
Right. I convinced the Halsey Fisher was his name, the general manager of the.
Well, I remember that name. Yeah.
I convinced him to let me have 2 quality control people back. And I told him I would change the way things happen around here with just 2 people. So I picked Donna Brown, who inspected everything that was going into the finishing department. So she would inspect them after they were sanded and ready for paint. And she knew what she was doing. She had worked in that department for years, and she was a trusted, smart employee. Very good. So I said, give me Donna to do that. And she started, I said, well, you want to paint something that's already cracked or broken? Why are you not looking at it? You don't forward anything that's not good.
You're just wasting time and money. Yeah.
You're killing it. So, and then I got Mike Harden, who was another, employee from the 70s. Mike had been there for years. He and his brother, Randall, they both worked there forever. And I said, let me have Mike Harden inspecting them before they leave the plant. So I make sure everyone's tuned up right. Everyone plays, and they let me have that. And that really changed everything. Our sales started skyrocketing when we started doing that. And he saw the difference. He was like, yeah, that's what we need. So I was allowed to get one in every department. I was like, you really need to stop it in where the origin of the flaw. If anything happens, we need to stop right now. If there's something, because look, it's a handmade instrument. If you ever seen the tour of the Gibson factory, it's very exciting and it's unbelievable. You see what some of these people do with a scraper blade, with a little sharpened, knife, and it's really magical to see some of this talent that lives in that plant, and so, but it's still hand done, and mistakes happen, stuff happens. It's wood, it cracks, it splits. When you drill it, it doesn't always exactly do what you want it to do. So, there was a lot of things, and we really, in the late 90s, the quality started coming back, and really it's been the same ever since. Once we went back to that and we got rid of the TQM, the guys were, we put people back who knew what they were doing and wouldn't pass a guitar if it wasn't right. And so,
yeah, I remember every department. And how many departments were there? Like 12? There was a bunch, right? They all had inspection.
Yeah, it had to before it could leave the other, that was a good way of keeping track of inventory, good way of keeping track of production numbers. You knew everything that was happening, so when we went back to that, it really started to flourish. And then we got, the plant started right when we got Julie and we got some other good managers in and we really started turning it around. You came and then we started doing all that. And after the quality control was the guitar of the week. I was I was running quality control in the paint department at the same time. And then I started running the electronics, doing that too. And I just couldn't do it all. So, and then Jeff Allen came up and said, hey, Henry wants a guitar of the month or something.
No, we started off with the week.
Was it the week? Did we start off with the week?
Week came first. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Jeff's like, I'm going to put you in charge of that whole program. You need to come up with 48 new guitars. and you and I looked at you and like, okay,
here we go.
and really, it really was a challenge.
It was.
Really couldn't do new stuff, go crazy because there was tooling concerns. There's a lot of
supply,
everything from
material
rack.
supply, right?
Right, exactly. And so the best thing to do is have different versions of what we already knew how to do. Different paint jobs, different pickup combinations, different pick guards. I mean, even the guitar behind you is a good example. The 295 Les Paul,
Oh
Look at
yeah.
that.
Yep.
So that was all derived from having to come up with something,
We had, and
48 new guitars.
the funny thing was, Frank, I remember that day. Jeff goes, I just got back from a meeting, and we're going to do a Guitar of the Month program. And I just remember thinking, if I came up with that, or you came up with that on your own, it never would have happened. There would have been so much pushback, right? But it came from the top, the tippy top, right?
Right.
So we're like,
a hard sell. We thought it was like, oh my God, what a daunting task, First thing you do is go to the purchasing department and it's like, okay, guys, what's out there? What can you get me? I need some crazy pick guard material. I need, paint. I need,
Who are we on credit hold with?
Right. What's out there? What's available? I mean, you couldn't start going crazy because you couldn't have cases made for something that quick.
Right.
Everything was 1 week turnaround, So it was a daunting task, and it was fun to do. And we came up with, 48 new guitars we did that year.
Dude,
right?
that period was the most fun and the most stressful. It wasn't the most stressful time at Gibson, but it was definitely the most fun. You and I just pulling shit out of the air and ideas. And we didn't have a lot of time to put that together either.
No, because it was like
no time.
October or something. In January was NAMM.
NAMM. We had to have it ready for NAMM.
We barely could get 4 prototypes made to show the first month. We were going to roll them out once a month. We'd have 4 different models, something like that. And it was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So, I mean, and we weathered the storm with a bunch of stuff. Henry's like, I want a reverse flying V. And I said, well, what does that look like in the meeting? And he drew it on a piece of paper. And I was like, oh, like that? And, we didn't want to build it. And we did. And we sold 400 of the first one.
So we're going to have
to sit down and play.
I know.
When you sit down, that thing would sit on your lap, and it was like perfectly positioned. But
so
yeah,
we're going to, Well, I'm sorry to just jump in here, but we're going to spend time in other episodes going through in greater detail on the Guitar of the Week program. But yeah, I will add that we showed that reverse V at NAMM, and it was the first one to sell out. It sold out in about an hour and a half.
Yeah,
we thought it was the dumbest idea.
Yep, that goes to tell you what we knew.
Yep.
Yeah. But I mean, we had some cool stuff. We wanted to make it look like Carina, like the original V, remember?
Oh, yeah.
We couldn't get that wood, so we came up with a process. Chris Roberts was like, we'll put white filler and spray it amber, and that amber will make the white filler look like the Carina. And it did. It had a cool look to it. Yeah. We had some creative
we wanted, I don't know if you remember, but we pitched doing Carina, and we got the no, that's a custom shop thing.
Yeah, right.
So then you and I were like, all right, let's figure something else out then.
yeah, we can make it look like Carina. No, it ain't Carina, it's mahogany.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's necessity is the mother of all invention, right?
That's true. Yep.
We had to find a way to do it and come up with a new model and come up with something that we thought could sell. Some things were kind of crazy that we went out there and tried some weird stuff,
Yep.
We had some painters do some crazy stuff, so.
But you ran R&D, right? That was your last title, right? You ran R&D.
Yeah, I was the head of R&D at that point. I was the head of the engineering department and the pattern shop, and we designed all the fixtures for all the stuff, and we would make it in. I hired Jim DeCola to help us. We needed help doing a lot of stuff. And towards the robot guitars, I traveled to Germany so many times, broke my leg in Germany and had a lot of traveling over there and working with the Tronicle guys on the tuning, the robotic tuning, and put a lot of effort into that. And then towards the end, it just got crazy, with Henry and he was letting a lot of people go, and I was one of them, and so was everybody, really.
Yep.
You know. So, but that was 2015. I left the plant at 2015. So, but yeah, so 1987 to 2015, making guitars. So
It was a great run.
the best years of your life, you know. You think about it.
Yep.
I was 24 when I started, and 52 when I let go. So,
all right. So me, I became a certified guitar nut when I was about 10 years old. Started getting into music. I was listening to like a lot of British invasion groups, right? And I loved the Beatles. I loved the Stones. And I specifically remember hearing the first time the intro of Heartbreaker by Led Zeppelin. And I just went, I want to do that. I want to do that.
that was the song, huh?
That intro, man, it just sounds so huge, right? And that huge tone was, of course, was made with a Les Paul. So I don't know if I picked the guitar or if it picked me. Because like you, my dad played drums, and we grew up, we had a drum set down in the basement. My older brother was playing some bass, so we all learned how to play drums first. So yeah, played guitar, was a guitar nut, playing in bands, doing the same thing like you were. And as I got older, I landed a job with a music rights company called BMI. They were out of Red Bank. I grew up in Jersey. Long story short, they moved me down here to Nashville. It was a different place and different culture from the in the new office in Nashville. So I started looking around, and I literally answered an ad in the paper. The first one was to be a product manager for Orange Amps.
Wow.
Now, I dabbled around in amps forever, knew how to tweak them, knew how to modify them, just kind of self-taught. I went, hey, I think I know how to do this. I was 23 at the time, so I come walking in to the old Epiphone building. I met with Lawson Peets, and he's like, yeah, I don't think you're the product manager kind of guy. I didn't have any experience doing that, so he goes, hey, I think they might be looking for some people in customer service. You want me to pass on your resume? I said, yeah, that'd be great. No problem. Next day I got a call. Hey, Kevin, we got your resume. Why don't you come in and fill out an application and do an interview? So you probably didn't have to go through this. So I come in, and at that time we had to take a 3-hour test. Did you ever have to take? Okay.
Yeah. It was handwritten, you know. Randy Russell.
Oh, mine was on a computer.
No, mine was before computers. I took it was on paper.
Wow.
I sat here. Yeah, I took it at USA. The first week I came. Randy Russell was the guy to give the test.
Gave the test? That's great.
Yeah. Yep.
So I sat in the HR department.
Remember?
What's that?
I remember one question from that. Which are you least?
Ooh.
Hardworking, honest, or trustworthy?
Yeah.
Which are you least?
And they would ask you that again later with some different descriptors to see how much you were remembering or lying.
Honest. I picked most honest. I'm most honest. And I just stayed with that through the whole test. Honest. Every time it said honest, I picked honest. But what a crazy test. Yes, to answer your question.
It was 3 hours of like a psychological test to work at Gibson. Come on.
Turns out it was probably necessary. I don't know what they got from it.
I don't know. Frank, still some people got through that. Some people got through that net that shouldn't have.
Yeah, I don't know how. They just clicked B.
All right. So anyway, I started off in 96. It was like April 96 at the corporate office on 1818 Elm Hill Pike in the customer service department. And I totally remember my first day. I come in and I was late and I didn't know it. Okay. When I was working at BMI, it was 9 to 5. Well, Gibson was 8 to 5 and no one said anything to me.
Oh,
so
wow.
I come strolling in at 8:55. They're like, you're late. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm early. I'm here. I got 5 minutes. Like, no, we're 8 to 5. And I went, oh, shit. So I start doing the calculation of how many hours and what I'm getting paid. I'm like, oh, man, I didn't know that. And then this guy, Charlie, showed, hey, sit here. Here's your desk. I sat down at a computer. I didn't even know how to turn the thing on, right? So it was running Windows 95. So we start up that, and I learned how to use email. I never used email before,
Wow.
So the guys around were like, hey, man, you want to jump on the phone? I'm like, I had worked the phones at BMI and other places for years, so I wasn't afraid of the phone. I said, yeah, man, I'll jump right in. No big deal. Well, they had these headsets. And again, at BMI, well, these were kind of nicer but the earphone plugged into your ear like they do today.
Right.
But there was a used one on my telephone thing. So when you started at BMI, you got your own. Like, here's yours, and it's sealed. It's brand new.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And the module, the module was out. The batteries were dead. So I get up and I talk to my boss and I said, hey, is there a supply room where I get a new earphone and I need some batteries for my thing? And he goes, oh, well, no, we don't really have that. Just take that earphone home and put it in the dishwasher and just wash it and use it tomorrow. And during lunch, just go out and buy some AA batteries. I'll pay you back. So
Yeah.
I go back to my desk and I'm like, what the hell did I get myself into?
Where am I?
This place is a dump. Anyway, long story short, then I jump in on the phones and I just took off from there. Right next to me in customer service was a whole bookshelf with all the schematics and log books and every catalog, all the literature. Dude, I poured through that stuff and loved it because I was such a guitar nut anyway,
Right.
I just absorbed all that and just, after so much time, I ended up managing the department. So I managed customer service and then managed the warranty service center program with Roger Fritz. He and I kind of managed that together. So Roger would go through their application and say whether they were an A level or B level service center. And then, I took care of the rest, all the claims that would come in and talking to guys and they might need parts and this, that, and the other thing. And just the rest of the customer service operations. We also had dealer services as part of that group. If a dealer had to return something, they didn't call the sales department. They went to dealer services. So we had, I think, 4 people in that room covering any dealer needs, missed shipments, missed orders, and, any warranty things that needed to come in. Downstairs at 1818 was receiving and the repair shop. So, we were really connected that way where if we had a customer who had a certain issue, I can walk downstairs and go look at their guitar or whatever.
Right.
So.
Right, yeah.
Right, you remember downstairs it was the repair shop and Impulse was over there and the warehouse was in the back.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So anyway, did that for a number of years, and then I got recruited over to the sales department, and they kind of restructured the sales department where inside sales they moved us to the back of the Epiphone building, which was kind of a funky place, but at that time they had we brought in all of our regional sales managers. So I got to spend every day getting trained by all of our 4 of our outside sales guys. And I didn't know it at the time, but the education that we got in there with our seasoned guys like, Jerry Lambert and Aldo and Frank Fry, John Lowry, those guys knew their stuff.
Right.
So we got to get taught by 4 of them how it worked. So I did that for a while, thinking I was still going to move back to Jersey and work for Gibson as an area sales rep. That's kind of what my goal was. I wanted to I was homesick. Just wanted to get back to, kind of where I grew up. Yeah. I don't really feel the same way anymore, but, anyway, so that's what I was striving for. And through the years in the sales department, I was always just trying to kick ass, make it work. Started to travel a little bit on the outside with my territory outside manager. Long story short, some other guys went outside from inside that didn't work out. They probably should never have been put in that position to go outside anyway, but it was kind of an easy slot to fill. Well, a couple of guys crashed and burned, and Henry basically told my bosses at that time, nobody inside goes outside anymore. They don't work. So they told me this. So I went, well, I'm in a dead-end job then. What am I doing here? Where do I go from here?
Yeah, right.
So I reached out to, I think it was Kevin Young, who was over at Gibson USA at the time. I said, Kev, I just hit a dead end. I gotta find something else. So I started reaching out to other people around the company. Next thing I know, Jeff Allen wrote me. He goes, hey, man, I got told I got to hire some new clinicians. So why don't you come over and audition to be a clinician? I'm like, all right. I've been playing since I've been, 10 years old. I know how to get just about any kind of tone out of any Gibson there is. I'm like, all right. So I go over there. I do my audition. I thought I blew it. I was horrible. And then after I had to do my demo in front of Jeff and Chuck Yamick. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So the guitar kept going out of tune. It was just, oh my God, it just killed my momentum.
Was Chuck
then after that
at that point? Chuck
what's that?
Chuck was already a clinician at that point, right?
He was, yeah.
Right.
So he's going to get two more guys to split up the country. We just wanted to do more with more of our national accounts. All right. So I get back to Gibson USA. Back to the sales department where Fred was running the department, good friend with Jeff. He goes, hey, man, how'd it go? And I go, I blew it. I totally blew it. What was I thinking? What was I thinking? I was beating the crap out of myself. So about 20 minutes later, Fred comes back and goes, I just talked to Jeff. He said you did a great job. What are you talking about? Oh, I thought I was horrible.
That's what a great job is? Okay, good.
Yeah, okay. Well, Frank, after I was done and I stood up and I'm talking to Chuck and he goes, hey, man, you can't ever let that happen again where your guitars go out of tune like that. You got to make sure. I'm like, man, lesson learned. Tell me about it. Well, at that time, this guy comes walking in, picks up a guitar, and just starts playing. This is in the marketing department, by the way. And this guy's playing and just killing it. I'm like, oh, my God, is he next? Because this guy just blew me away. Turns out it was Keith Medley.
Okay, yeah.
He wasn't auditioning for anything. He just came up there to play like he always did,
Right.
So anyway, all right. So then I go out on the road. Bart Walsh got hired at the same time as a clinician. So Bart and I just kind of learned the ropes together being a clinician for months. We went out in the Northeast, went to just about every guitar center out there and did clinics. We had a blast. It was a lot of fun. So then, I did the clinician thing for maybe about 9 months. And the funny thing was we were doing them at guitar centers. And at that time, some guitar centers were better than others with doing clinics because I would send out my packet weeks in advance, set up the date, just get them all hyped. We had postcards and posters and all this stuff. I'll show a poster in a minute. There's one left without, a mustache drawn on it and black eyes and stuff. So, I would get to the guitar center. I would fly in that day, but I'd let them know, the day before, I'm coming tomorrow. Remember, clinics tomorrow. Please let people know. Send out the postcards. So then I'd call them when I landed. Hey, I'm here. I'll be there at 6 o'clock to set up. 7 o'clock, we do the clinic. I had my tracks with me. I had a guitar. I had a little preamp. I plugged direct in. It was super easy. Well, sometimes I'd show up, Frank, and my poster would be up on the wall. And at the bottom of it, it said, location and time. It would say tonight, which means it wasn't up yesterday or the days before.
Put it up, right.
Probably when I called the store manager and say, hey, I'm here in town. I'm coming tonight. Oh, shit. Put up the posters, So, plus the other thing is no one knows who I am. I'm not, it's not like you're going to go see Steve Vai or Paul Gilbert or Zach doing a clinic.
Or, even have any kind of, recording, hey, the guy from this song or whatever, this band, who are we? Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I use it as an opportunity to, tell people about how it's made, why we make it, how you use it, all that stuff. I took a little bit of a different approach. So after a number of months, Jeff's like, hey, man, how's it going out there? And I said, we need to be training the guys in the stores. They're dying for training. They're all asking me, hey, man, can you train my guys before the clinic starts? They never get any training.
Right.
Because Guitar Center was under one person.
Yeah.
Now, they tried to encourage all the other BDMs across the country, just stop in a Guitar Center and do training with those guys, but they weren't getting paid for that. Their numbers were coming from other dealers, so they never really did that.
Right.
So I told Jeff at the time, hey, man, we got to train these guys. Why don't I just do product training? So then I became like a product specialist. And eventually that turned into brand manager when, product manager when other product managers left. And I'm like, hey, I've been doing the gig anyway. Might as well just do it, right? Which was like a dream job for me ever since I got to the company. Everybody wanted to do that. But I kind of found my way into the job because, a lot of people knew I knew guitars. I knew what I was doing. I knew customers. I knew customer service. I knew branding. I knew all that stuff. So
Right.
And that's when I just started doing it. And that's when you and I had all these projects, and I was doing other models, and we had to do the digital guitar, we had to do the robot guitar in the middle of that. Huge undertakings that really weren't done before.
Oh,
that
God.
we took a huge chance, huge risks, and a lot of it paid off amazingly, right? And then my final days at Gibson was I got moved to Gibson Gear because they always struggled.
Right.
Those guys, they were very passionate about what they did in Elgin, Illinois. But so Henry put me with Dave Timmons. We had to close down the Elgin facility and move that all into Nashville.
Yeah.
And then the flood hit.
Right.
Those were stressful days, right?
Yeah, sure was, man.
So
Sure was.
it was
Flood was devastating.
It changed a lot, man. It made it so hard. So eventually I'm like, I got to go. I was talking to other people around the company again, like Scott Eisenbray. Hey, man, what's over here? I'm talking to Rick at Custom Shop. What do you got over there? And it's like, I think it's time. And how Gibson went through people, and sometimes people stayed way too long and just got beat up. And I always hoped, I hope I know when it's time, and I don't just get stuck in a corner and just get whipped.
Right.
Because we saw that happen to some people.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It was at that point when I went, it's time to go.
Right. And on the wall.
Yeah, and I had 3 companies on my list: Fender, Martin, or Line 6, and I ended up going to Line 6.
Right.
But I always kept in touch with all you guys.
Yeah. That's the thing about it. It was always a good family atmosphere.
Totally.
Yep. I still, play golf with Herb. I still talk to Ron, and I still have a lot of good friends from there that I still talk to and see, whenever I can. So yeah, I wouldn't change anything.
Nope.
When I did that robot guitar demo, right? It wasn't even working. I stayed up all night long on the phone with the developers over in California, all night long. So it was like at 8:00 in the morning at Times Square Hard Rock Cafe.
Wait, was that the Firebird X?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Firebird
You said
X.
robot.
Yeah, well, that was kind of the robot thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just went horrible. And I had to do that in front of all these stars. Ace Frehley.
Yeah, I remember Ace was there. Yep.
The Roots were there. JJ French. Lou Paulo was there. Les Paul's right-hand man.
Yep.
And I'm trying to play this guitar that barely worked, and I was like, man, you got all these guys. Why don't you just let Ace Frehley play it? He was like, don't let Ace Frehley touch it.
No, exactly.
But you. Henry was like, nobody touches it but you. And then he made me write up a script, and I worked my way through all the sounds that were working at the time. It's unfortunate too, because man, there was a lot of potential with that guitar, and it all got left on the table because of his demands, and
in the rush to get it out.
We're launching it this day. We're doing this day, and it really could have been a really nice guitar. And he started messing with the shape and the size and the headstock, and then he just destroyed it. We wanted to do it on a normal platform, you know,
Right.
that wouldn't freak people out. The guitar itself was wild, you know, and the wild look to it, the whole thing about it, you know, and it's a shame, but it really could have been something amazing. It had the potential. The sounds in there were like Pro Tools sounds, you know, so.
Oh, yeah. You guys loaded it up with all sorts of cool stuff.
It could have been amazing. Some of the things it could do were just crazy.
Did you ever see the video of them crushing them in Memphis?
No, I don't want to see that. I don't want to, because I think
it's not good.
The hours and miles I traveled for that guitar.
Dude, and the money.
Know, I went to Germany 10 times at least for that guitar, you know, doing that work. And, you know, like I said, my leg, I got in an accident over there and my leg's never going to be the same. I have German engineering in my right leg. So, yeah, titanium screws and bolts, and that happened over there in Hamburg. But, you know, it's just unfortunate that all that money and time and effort got wasted, you know. But
well, there's a few projects that kind of end up in that category, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yep.
And now we'll leave those for another episode.
Yes, we will. Hey, that's a good transition to wrap it up. So anyway, that's Frank and mine's backstory. That's kind of how we got to know each other so many years ago. And
wake up, everybody, wake up.
They fast forwarded. Anyway, hey, please remember to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And remember, we have an email address. It's behindtheheadstock@gmail.com. Send us any questions or episode ideas or general feedback. But be nice. Right?
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Go Behind the Headstock with Kevin and Frank. 2 ex-Gibson employees talking about guitars and the guitar industry with an inside perspective.